My name is Rachel Whitmore. I always thought I knew what my family stood for: hard work, legacy, respect. I left our hometown of Easton Ridge, Illinois after college, determined to make my own mark. But when I came back for just a few weeks, just until I figured out my next step, what I found beneath our perfect family dinners and polished company brochures was something else entirely. This is the story of what I uncovered in the house my father built and how it nearly destroyed us all. They say you can't go home again, but I did. And the moment I stepped into the Whitmore house, sunlight falling perfectly across the mahogany floors, the air infused with my mother's rose lavender candles, I knew something was wrong. Not wrong like a fire alarm, wrong like a breath you don't know you're holding until it burns your lungs. My father greeted me with his signature grin, the same one that won over mayors and board members alike. "Rachel's back! The brainiac returns!" He laughed, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cedarwood and dust. My mother, Sarah, kissed my cheek lightly, brushing a non-existent strand of hair from my face. Her smile was beautiful and strained. Easton Ridge hadn't changed. It still looked like a postcard someone forgot to send. Colonial homes lined the tree-shaded streets. The community fountain still spouted its choreographed jets every hour. And across from City Hall stood the familiar green signage of Whitmore and Cobilo Construction, a family business, a town pillar, a name etched into more than just buildings. I wasn't supposed to stay long, a few weeks at most. A pit stop between graduation and whatever corporate job would claim me next. But something about being back scratched at the back of my mind, like there was a loose thread tugging from inside the walls. The dinners were always too perfect. Wine glasses sparkled, napkins folded like swans. And yet, the smiles lingered a beat too long. My father's phone always rang during dessert, and he always took the call in the garage. My mother's hands trembled ever so slightly as she poured wine. On the third night, I passed by the study and saw my father sitting in the dark, elbows on knees, forehead in hands. He didn't notice me. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was stress. A big project, small-town gossip, but I'd lived in that house long enough to know when the silence meant something. And this silence? It was dense. The next morning, over breakfast, I offered to help out around the office. "Digitizing records or something," I said casually. "I'm not doing much until I leave anyway." My father hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Sure," he said. "You can take a look at the old storage room, back of the building. Some of it's ancient. Might be fun for a history nerd like you." The Whitmore and Kobe headquarters was a two-story brick building tucked between the bank and the fire station. I remembered running through its halls as a child, pretending the stairwell was a castle turret. Now it felt smaller, older. The storage room was exactly what you'd expect: a cave of stacked boxes, yellowing binders, blueprints curling at the edges. Dust coated everything like a veil. I wore gloves. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Always wear gloves when you dig through old things. Dust carries memory." She was half right. Dust doesn't just carry memory. It exposes what you tried to hide. I cataloged invoices, permits, floor plans. I found projects dated back to the 80s, elementary schools, banks, libraries. All clean, organized, until I found the file labeled Community Center Annex, 2003. It wasn't out of place, but it felt heavier. I opened it. Inside, conflicting inspection reports, two versions, one stamped passed, structurally sound, the other failed, substandard beam integrity. Same signature, same date. A mistake? Maybe. But then came the receipts from a supplier I'd never heard of. J&R Alloys, Scranton. High volume orders, paid in full, fast. One handwritten note nearly faded. "Expedite steel before Henderson reviews specs." Henderson. The name rang a bell. I searched my memories. Then it clicked. Harold Henderson, Grandpa Whitmore's original partner, died of a heart attack at the site, around the same time the annex opened. And Uncle Gary? He disappeared that same week. I hadn't seen him since. I stared at the folder for a long time. My hands shook a little. Something didn't fit. 2 decades of silence felt suddenly loud. That night, over dinner, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, Dad, did something weird happen with the community center project back in '03? I saw some odd paperwork." He dropped his fork. It clattered against the porcelain louder than it should have. He picked it up too fast. "Those old records? Rachel, come on. That was 20 years ago. We had a different system back then. Everything was manual, probably just clerical noise. Don't overthink it." My mother smiled a little too quickly. "You know how messy those old files are." I nodded, smiled, let it drop. But after dinner, I opened my laptop and started a list. Oddities, names, discrepancies. And at the top, Mr. Harold Henderson, died on site 2003. Beneath that, Gary Whitmore, vanished days later. Somewhere inside me, something shifted. I hadn't come back to dig up the past, but the past had just found me. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. No one else was there. I unlocked the storage room with the same key my father gave me, but this time I moved differently, more deliberate. The air smelled of paper and insulation, and the light filtering through the small vent window cast streaks of pale gold over the shelves. I bypassed the marked binders and focused on the back wall. Boxes stacked with years no longer labeled. A metal filing cabinet stood crooked in the corner, a drawer half stuck like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, a pile of mismatched documents, project timelines, bidding records, memos that no longer made sense. But between them, I found something heavier. A small, battered metal lockbox, scratched at the corners, paint faded with time. I turned it in my hands. No lock, just a sliding latch. But it was stuck, resistant, like it didn't want to give itself up. Then I saw it. Underneath the bottom drawer of the cabinet, taped where only the desperate would check, a single brass key tarnished at the edges. I used it. Inside the lockbox, Polaroids of the community center construction site, a rusted cufflink, a folded envelope burned along one edge. The paper felt like it would crumble between my fingers. I unfolded it carefully, holding my breath. The handwriting was slanted. Familiar. "David, I told you we should have shut it down. The materials were never up to code, and you know it. If Harold finds out what we covered up, he won't go quietly. He's already talking to city inspectors. I don't want any part of this mess. I'm leaving Easton Ridge for good. You want to carry Dad's sins? That's your choice, not mine." No signature. But I knew. It was Uncle Gary's handwriting. My pulse rang in my ears. I sat down right there on the concrete floor, letter open on my lap, the photographs scattered around me. This wasn't just about financial missteps or sloppy paperwork. This was a cover-up, and someone had died. Harold Henderson didn't collapse from a heart attack, at least not like they said. And Uncle Gary didn't just disappear, he fled. I went through the rest of the box. One file contained an early blueprint draft for the community center. Scribbled on the margins were changes in beam weight, rebar thickness, and support distribution. The final versions submitted to the city had none of those annotations. They'd hidden it. Whatever happened out there, someone made sure it didn't reach the surface. And for 20 years, no one had touched this box. Back at home, I spread the contents of the lockbox across my bedroom floor like a crime scene. I didn't want to believe what I was piecing together, but the more I looked, the more the pattern formed. I created a folder on my laptop labeled CC Annex Truth. I scanned the letter, the blueprint, the photos. Then I started cross-referencing supplier names. J&R Alloys popped up again, and nowhere else in the Whitmore archive. A single-use vendor. I checked town contracts. J&R Alloys wasn't even listed in city records, meaning someone had overridden that detail before submission. I searched for Harold Henderson's obituary. It was short. Died suddenly on site. Beloved father and founding partner. No mention of an autopsy. No follow-up articles. Just nothing. I called the Easton Ridge Library and requested copies of the town council minutes from 2003. The librarian offered to scan and send them. I thanked her. I was grasping at ghosts. That night, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. She held a wine glass in one hand. Her expression was unreadable. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "is everything all right?" "I'm just doing some digging, for curiosity." She stepped inside. Her eyes drifted to the open folder on my desk. "Sometimes, Rachel, old things are better left where they belong." "In boxes?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to my dresser, placed a folded blanket on the foot of the bed, an old habit, and smoothed the non-existent wrinkles with deliberate care. Then she looked at the photographs. "Your father worked very hard to protect this family," she said. "He still does." I waited. For a confession, a plea, a warning. But she simply turned and walked out. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a second folder. Things that don't add up. Because now it wasn't just a question of what happened. It was how far they were willing to go to make sure no one ever found out. And the deeper I dug, the more I feared that the truth wasn't buried underground. It was built into the walls. I told my parents I was visiting a friend in Chicago. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was leaving town. But I wasn't heading north. I was flying west. The postcard had been buried in an old photo album my mom kept under the hallway credenza. I remembered it because I used to trace the desert lines with my finger, a highway cutting through sand like a scar. On the back, a message in slanted writing. "Rachel girl, keep drawing. Don't let them dull your colors. Uncle G." The stamp read Mesa, Arizona. I found him in a staff directory for a retirement complex on the outskirts of town. Cactus Bloom Senior Living, maintenance crew, night shift. I booked a flight and didn't tell anyone. Mesa was all warmth and rust-colored light. The rental car smelled like coconut air freshener. I drove past stretches of stucco homes and blooming cacti until I pulled into the back lot of the facility. One flickering floodlight illuminated a rust-stained shed. He was sweeping the sidewalk. Uncle Gary looked older than I remembered, but not frail. His beard had gone completely silver, and he wore a baseball cap pulled low. When I stepped out of the car, he didn't recognize me at first. Then his eyes narrowed. "Rachel?" I nodded. He dropped the broom. "You shouldn't be here," he said. But he didn't ask me to leave. We sat in the break room with a vending machine humming beside us. He poured us both weak coffee. I didn't drink mine. "I found the letter," I said. "The one you wrote Dad." His jaw locked, but he didn't speak. "I know what happened at the community center, Uncle Gary." He laughed, not a happy sound. "You don't know anything, kid. You just scratched the surface." "Then tell me the rest." He stared at the styrofoam cup in his hands like it might offer absolution. "I told your dad we had to stop. The beams were bad. I saw the reports. Henderson knew too. He was going to report us." He looked at me then, eyes rimmed red. "We didn't kill him. Not on purpose. It was raining. He slipped on the scaffolding. David grabbed for him too late." "But you covered it up," I said. He didn't deny it. "Your grandfather said the company couldn't survive another scandal. Told us to clean it up. So we did. Told the medics he collapsed. Heart attack. Signed off on new reports. Burned the old ones. I couldn't sleep after that. So I left." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you ever come back?" Gary looked down at his palms. "Some guilt sticks. I figured staying gone was the only decent thing I had left." I reached into my bag and pulled out a USB drive. "These are scans from the blueprints, your notes, the inspection copies, the letter. I've started compiling everything." He flinched. "I'm not here to ruin lives," I said. "But people still go to that building every day. If it's not safe—" "It wasn't built to last," he said flatly. "Not with what they used." I didn't sleep that night. He let me stay in his spare room, a converted sun porch with a creaky cot and a fan that whined through the dark. In the morning, I woke to the smell of burnt toast and coffee. Gary sat at the kitchen table with a stack of blueprints beside him. "I kept a backup," he said. "Didn't know why. Maybe I figured someone would come asking someday." He handed me the folder. "There's names in there, suppliers, inspectors who looked the other way." Your dad wasn't the only one who signed things he shouldn't have. I took it with both hands. It felt like holding a bomb. Back in Easton Ridge, the air felt heavier. Like the town knew I was coming. I didn't go straight home. I drove to the annex first, parked across the street, watched the kids spill out of the building after an after-school program. Their laughter echoed across the pavement. I watched the steel beams, the glass walls, the banners that read 20 years of community fluttering in the breeze. The danger wasn't theoretical anymore. It had names, dates, codes etched into the bones of the building. That night, I loaded the files onto my computer. I scanned Gary's folder, marked every change in materials, cross-referenced inspector IDs. I was building a case, not for revenge, but for protection. People needed to know. I reached out to a structural engineer I'd found online, told him I had documentation, photos, a timeline. He agreed to take a look, anonymously. While I waited, I returned to the storage room one last time. There were things I hadn't finished cataloging, notes from 24, quiet references to cost recovery and undocumented procurement. It was all there, hiding in the open. The engineer called 3 days later. "I can't make a full conclusion without site testing," he said, "but what I'm seeing here, it's not good." "What do you mean?" "If the beams were as underspec as these notes suggest, then the annex was never structurally sound. It's just luck nothing's happened yet. But snow load, an earthquake, even a renovation that shifts balance, any of those could bring it down." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat on my bed, staring at my screen. I had the truth, and I had a choice. Burn it all down, or try to salvage something. So I wrote a letter to the city's building authority. I included excerpts, photos, offered to meet. Then I saved the draft. I needed one more thing, to see if my parents would finally tell me the truth. I didn't sleep. Instead, I stayed up organizing the evidence. Each photo, each scanned page, each memo went into carefully labeled folders. By sunrise, I had a USB drive and a printed binder with color-coded tabs. Proof, not just suspicion. I ate toast in silence. My mother placed a peach beside my plate like always. She didn't ask what I'd been doing. She didn't need to. Her silence was the same silence I'd grown up with, polished, preserved, and deadly. After breakfast, I told them I needed to talk. Both of them. My father was in his office reading emails. My mother followed me in and sat on the edge of his desk. I stood across from them and placed the binder between us. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof," I said, "of what you covered up, of what Gary tried to stop, of what killed Harold Henderson." David Whitmore's eyes narrowed. He opened the binder. Flip, flip, flip. Then he stopped. My mother didn't reach for it. She just stared at my face. "You've been digging," my father said. "You've been snooping through 20-year-old ghosts." "No," I replied. "I've been following a trail you left wide open. You didn't bury it. You just pretended it wasn't rotting." He slammed the binder shut. "You don't understand what was at stake. Your grandfather nearly lost the company in the 90s. One more scandal and it would have been over. All the people we employed, the families we supported." "At what cost?" I asked. "A man died. A building is flawed. People use it every day." My mother finally spoke. "We never meant for anyone to get hurt." "But you knew they could," I said. "You knew, and you did nothing." My father stood. "What do you want, Rachel? You want me to fall on my sword? Destroy everything? For what? A mistake made under pressure 2 decades ago?" "No," I said. "I want you to admit it, and I want you to help me fix it." He looked at me like I was a stranger. "We can't fix it," he said. "We can only pray it holds." He left the room. My mother stayed. "Are you going to the city?" she asked. "I haven't decided." She nodded once, then she reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. Inside, a signed blank check. "This isn't hush money," she said. "This is in case you choose differently." I didn't tear it up. I just left it on the table. Later, I found her standing in the doorway of my room, watching me pack. "You're not like us," she said softly. That's not an insult. It's a kind of hope. I met with the city inspector that afternoon. Nadia Reyes, mid-30s, efficient, skeptical. I handed her the binder. She flipped through it, expression unreadable. This is serious, she said. If any of this is verifiable, the annex will need to be shut down immediately. It's all verifiable, I said. She asked how I got it. From someone who was there, and from someone who regretted being there. She told me there would be an inquiry, a site review, an emergency council session. That night, I walked past the annex. Banners still hung across the front, celebrating 20 years of service. Kids laughed in the playground beside it. Parents sat on benches checking phones. It looked perfect. It was hollow. At home, my father sat in the living room, television off. The lights were dim. When the calls come, he said without looking at me, you'll be the one they blame. I know, I said. And when the company crumbles, when people lose their jobs, when your mother can't walk into a grocery store without whispers, what will you say then? I'll say the building might have collapsed on someone's child if I hadn't. He finally looked at me. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make you right. It just makes you alone. I've been alone since the day you started lying. Neither of us spoke after that. The next morning, I woke to news vans parked across from the annex. Inspectors in hard hats surrounded the perimeter. Caution tape unfurled like yellow veins across the building's entrance. The city was shutting it down. By noon, my father had resigned. By evening, our name was off the company's sign. And by midnight, I had packed everything I owned. I didn't leave to escape. I left because I'd done what I came home to do. And the rest, whatever it would become, was no longer mine to carry. The town still held the ceremony, despite the investigation, despite the caution tape, despite everything. They moved the anniversary indoors to the town hall auditorium. Streamers hung from the rafters, folding chairs filled the floor, a banner stretched across the stage, celebrating 20 years of Whitmore & Co. and the Easton Ridge Community Center. My mother wore her pearls. My father wore his best suit, his hair combed sharp, his face unreadable. I wore gray. No makeup, my hair in a low bun. I didn't feel like being seen. In my bag, the last copy of the engineer's statement, Gary's signed affidavit, a flash drive, my final insurance policy. Nadia Reyes caught my eye from across the room. She gave a subtle nod. I nodded back. The mayor stepped up to the mic. She spoke about legacy, about partnership, about community. Then came my father's turn. He walked onto the stage with applause, held the microphone like he was born to it. 20 years ago, he began, we broke ground on more than just a building. We laid a foundation for generations to gather, to learn, to celebrate. I stood up, not to interrupt, not to protest, but to walk, out of the room, through the side hallway, down the stairs, into the records office where a city clerk waited for me. I handed her the envelope. Deliver this to the Oversight Committee, I said. It's already been vetted by Reyes. She glanced inside, her eyes widened. Do you want your name attached? No, I said. I want it to be about the building, not me. When I returned, my father was still speaking, still charming, still proud, and I let him have that moment, because the fall wouldn't be public, it would be precise and irreversible. By Monday, the story broke. Not from me, from the Inspector General's office. Structural risk at Easton Ridge Community Center, the headline read. New evidence suggests long-standing cover-up. Photos accompanied the story, the same ones I'd scanned weeks ago, steel beams, labels, notes in Gary's hand. The town buzzed. Council members called emergency sessions. The mayor issued a statement. Whitmore & Company suspended all operations pending legal review. My mother stopped going out. My father didn't speak. Gary sent a single text. You did what I couldn't. Proud of you, kid. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. I packed my things in silence. My lease in Boston was waiting. So was a deferred job offer. I took the train out of Easton Ridge with 2 bags, no goodbyes. At the last minute, I left an envelope in the mailbox. Inside, the check my mother gave me. Untouched. With a note. I didn't want to be bought. I wanted to be believed. 6 months later, I heard the annex would be rebuilt. New name, new contractors, a plaque dedicated not to the past, but to accountability. No one mentioned the Whitmores. Good. Sometimes legacy is what you dismantle so others can start fresh. I visit Easton Ridge once a year now, quietly. I walk past the park, the fountain, the corner where the old sign used to stand. And I remember that some buildings look strong until the day they don't, that some families do too. That truth is heavier than steel, but it's the only thing that holds. The new building opened on a bright spring morning. No ribbon cutting, no speeches, just quiet footsteps and cautious optimism. They called it the Easton Commons, a space rebuilt not just with better materials, but with transparency etched into every design choice. Steel beams were stamped with traceable codes, inspection records posted in the lobby. The plaque out front read, "Reconstructed with integrity, for safety, for truth, for community." No mention of the Whitmore name. I walked through it on a Sunday. No one recognized me. That was the point. In a quiet corner near the stairwell, I found a steel column. Tucked behind a vent panel, just above eye level, was a folded slip of paper, laminated, tucked carefully, taped shut with industrial clear wrap. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Gary's. For the kid who asked too many questions, may this one hold better than the last. I smiled. Outside, children played beneath new shade trees. A couple sipped coffee on a bench. Life had returned, not because we forgot, but because we chose to remember properly. I don't visit often, but when I do, I leave a fresh note tucked behind that beam. No names, just a sentence. Built on truth, may it stand. And then I go, not with sorrow, but with steadiness. Because the house my father built may have cracked, but the one I chose to stand for never will.